Hello and welcome to Solely Singleton, episode 187. I'm your host, Brad. This is my co-host, Eric.
How's it going?
And because it's that time of the year, welcome back, Christian.
That's right, it's Wednesday.
It's Wednesday, my dudes.
Dude, I mean, we actually had a decent run of not having to talk about new cards.
It was like a solid 2 months there.
Yeah.
We made it almost 2/3 of the way through what used to be a standard amount of time between sets.
It's been so long that I was scrolling through your all's feed and I saw your hot takes for the Poor Hammer, and I thought I'd been quiet fired.
All right. So without any further ado, let's jump in to Phyrexia All Will Be One and Phyrexia All Will Be Commander.
Sounds good.
Let's do it.
All right, so it's no small secret that Phyrexia All Will Be One is not a killer set for Cube, which is basically the format we all care about. However, it's still a very good set.
Dude, I think this set's honestly really cool. It's interesting because we've gone through so many sets in the past couple years that, like, it's honestly pretty easy to pick out, like, these are the sets that WotC cared about.
Yeah, and with 2022, Neo was obviously, all of the love was given there. And this year, unless something proves me wrong, it's this set. Like, Phyrexia All Will Be One has so much good effort put behind it.
Yeah, it really does. And a lot of it, like you said, is not going to be generally useful for Cube just because of how the keywords and that type of stuff is actually trying to work. But man, I am honestly excited to see what people can come up with cubes focused around this. Like, I don't know if honestly just like a set cube for this set.
I'd wait until, because there's 2 more parts of this quote-unquote block. It might be best to wait till those are done if you were doing like a thematic cube.
Yeah, because I think there could be some really cool, like, Mirrodin, Phyrexia cube that, like, exists that takes advantage of poison and all of that. And it doesn't have to be this, like, parasitic, because you'll have enough options now. And with the new Toxic, there's less parasitic stuff to it, so you can flavor in. And I'm honestly really excited to see what is possible once we get the rest of this.
Furthermore, I honestly think that this is one of the best sets in a while for Cube. It's not that it's the best set for number of cards that can go in a cube, but I think that's what makes it one of the best sets in a while for Cube, because we've had just such a waterfall of new cards where, as we've mentioned several times now, we're going to a new set going, is this better than the card that I literally just added in and I haven't gotten to try yet? I don't know. And then doing that over and over and over again, it's very unhealthy for actually building a functional cube.
True. And to be honest, I'm going to talk about it in my honorable mentions, but there's a lot of niche cards that are going to push for archetypes that aren't given that much love, but certain people want to push into their cube.
Yeah, and those are always helpful to have.
All right, it's time for us to do our heel turn. We're turning this into a top 5 because there's not enough to do like a standard hot takes. So let's talk about our honorable mentions before we get into our clickbait.
Okay, I'll start. We got a new sword, Sword of Forge and Frontier. It's red and green, and when you deal combat damage, exile top 2 cards. You can play them, and you can play an additional land. I don't think it's particularly good.
Sword of mid and mediocre.
But it is one of those, like, it's still a sword. So if you're interested, take a look. One that I wanted to bring up was Barbed Batterfist. This is a common. It's not great, but at 1 and a red, it's for Mirrodin, which brings in a 2/2. The equipped creature gets +1/-1, and it equips for 1. This is just a pretty strong common, and being an artifact equipment means that you have some synergies of what's trying to go on if you're trying to support more aggro artifact equipment stuff. So
yeah, because essentially this is a 2-mana 3/1 with upside.
Right, and equip 1 is nice. Like, equip 1 is something that you can legitimately use later on. So I just think it's a solid common. The last one I wanted to shout out was Staff of the Storyteller. And this one I think is really cool. I just don't think generally in cubes it's good enough comparatively. But I do actually want want to talk about this one, so I'll read it off real quick. Staff of the Storyteller is 1 and a white for an artifact. When Staff of the Storyteller enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. Whenever you create one or more creature tokens, put a story counter on Staff of the Storyteller, and you can pay 1 tap, remove a story counter from Staff of the Storyteller to draw a card. This hits all of the things that I enjoy about like a 2-drop do nothing, but it's also like it's got that 1/1 flyer with it. I don't know, man. I don't think it's going to be on the same tier as most general 2-drops in white, but I think this card's really cool.
I think it could, it swings well into what I want to talk about, which is it is a generally okay card that works well with a token theme. And one of the things that I wanted to show off is in my honorable mentions, Mondrak Glorious Dominus. 4-drop, 4/4. It has, if one or more tokens would be created under your control, twice that many tokens are created instead. And it's got the whole Dominus ability on it. To me, this set is really good for cards like this, where like I want to push tokens. This card isn't good enough to like generally make a cube, but if you're trying to push harder towards tokens, it's enough excuse to get there.
Yeah, definitely.
And then to continue into mine, I guess, my other two, I've got Bloated Contaminator, which is the 2 and a green 4/4 trample toxic 1 when it deals damage to a player proliferate.
That's your honorable mention, huh?
It's a good card.
Yeah.
It's a bit boring. To me, the only way it makes your cube reliably is if you want the proliferate. If you want the effect for like making counters more, and counters have a lot in cube just incidentally.
Especially in green, like green white +1/+1 counters is a legitimate theme.
Yeah. And of the 3 honorable mentions I have, it's the closest to just generally being good enough for cube. But I think it gets pushed to the best card in the set for you if you're trying to push counters.
Fair enough.
And I think this set is full of stuff like that, where like, oh my god, this will be great if I want to push counters. This will be great if I want to push tokens. This will be at least okay if I want to push artifacts, but I'm a giant simp for Tezzeret decks, so my last card is Microsynth Gardens.
God. Fair enough.
It's Shimmering Grotto, except you get the final ability of X tap, becomes a copy of a target non-token artifact you control with mana value X. So, hey, 2 worm coils.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of, like, probably better lines of play that are less stupid.
Sure, but it's not until end of turn. It just becomes a copy.
Oh, that's what I'm missing. I was going to say, but you tap it. Okay, that's what I'm missing. That's kind of cool.
This is honestly solid. And like you said, it's one of those, like, if you're trying to push that kind of stuff, this is something you could have fun with.
If you're pushing artifact decks and you've got, like, Steel Overseer, it's pretty dirty to have 2 Steel Overseers if someone hasn't played that deck before. Like,
yeah.
And that's cheap to do. Yeah, so that's what I think of the honorable mentions of this set as. Like, there is a bunch of stuff that I think is, like, almost there, but it has to be something you want for your cube.
Christian, what do you have for honorable mentions?
Yeah, so for my honorable mentions section, I basically created it to allow me to talk about cards that I don't want to put on my top 5, but should be there.
The boring tax removal spells.
Lightning Bolt variant number 8.
Exactly, yeah. I'm going to kind of talk as one, about Planar Disruption and Ossification. Both of these are 2 mana white removal spells that are enchantment-based and removal spells. Planar Disruption is just a downcosted Arrest. Arrest was originally 3 mana. This is the same card, but it's 2 mana. And actually, Arrest I don't think could hit Planeswalkers either, so...
Also, Arrest doesn't hit Artifact. Not that it matters quite as much at Uncommon, but in rare cubes, people have looked at Planar Disruption as well, just because Artifact Creature Planeswalker 2-drop removal.
So the card's good. It's not in my honorable mentions because it's worse than my top 5. Probably one of the better cards in the set, but it's just boring to talk about.
Planar Disruption is probably one of the best cards in the set if you don't, like, take a step back, ignore everything else. What's got the most power generally.
Yeah, but nobody wants to hear a top 5 removal spells in the set.
Not really.
Ossification, just real quick. Enchant a basic land you control. When it enters, you journey to nowhere a creature or planeswalker. They're both fine. Well, Planar Disruption's good. Ossification's fine.
Ossification's neat. I like the enchant a land, chain to the rocks kind of stuff. Those are just, I think that's a neat effect.
Lastly, I want to bring up Tyvar's Stand, which is X and a green for an instant. You give a target creature you control +X/+X, but more importantly, you also give it hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. We have had a couple of these now. I think this might be the best one, but I think its upside is also maybe one of its biggest downsides. So this has the sort of split card action of, okay, you can use this for 1 mana to protect something important at a key moment, or if you have a lot of mana, you can pump it into something and maybe win the game off of it. However, I think it has that awkwardness where it's like, if you're going for the pump, they can then respond, and now you don't have your protection spell. So you have to, I don't think it's as easy to play as it reads.
I think it is. You just get rid of the X. That's the proper way to play it.
I like the idea of you're in a position that you're kind of in control, but it's pretty obvious that the opponent's going to be able to stabilize, and you're just like, you know what? This protection thing, I'm just going to go for it.
You could also get you're playing ramp, you're against an aggro deck, they're swinging with their Rabble Master, all you've gotten is an elf, and you're like, screw it, I'll just trade this card for Rabble Master.
Yeah, it's just one of those, like, not the most exciting, but it's kind of neat.
Yeah. This one, more so than the other two, came very close to making my top 5, but I ended up cutting it as the 6th card, basically. That's my honorable mention section. And just as a quick aside, things with toxic, things with oil counters to an extent, like anything like that, I'm just not even discussing, because I just don't even want to put that kind of stuff in my cube.
I'm fine with all of the mechanics in this set, honestly. I actually prefer how they're doing poison this time over infect.
Agreed.
I think Toxic plus Proliferate is a good combo, and it's more interesting for Cube than Infect ever could have been.
Right.
But I understand people not liking poison in general, though. Like, I know that's one of those things that just triggers people, so whatever. It's okay to be wrong. You play Peasant, it's fine.
I can also accept that, like, if the card isn't, like, that good, and you have another alternative, but, like, this one has Toxic on it, but realistically, you're never going to win through poison just because there isn't proliferate support, there isn't other infect support, other toxic support. It's just a needless thing that you technically have to keep track of.
Exactly, and that's the annoying thing. And there are some cards that make mites. Like, for example, there's a 5 mana 3/3 flyer that makes 2 might tokens. And I'm like, that's actually pretty good, but I don't have it because I'm like, I don't want to introduce those mites because they have Toxic 1. But ultimately, most of the cards that had Toxic or created mites or anything like that, they're mostly side grades, so it doesn't hurt too much.
Right, and mites are tough just because, like, the can't block is a pretty big down.
Yeah, there is that aspect of it too.
All right, I guess with that, I am going to start the top 5.
Let's get into it.
Start off the top 5, I've got Gleeful Demolition. A single red for a sorcery. Destroy target artifact. If you controlled that artifact, create 3 1/1 red Phyrexian Goblin creature tokens.
Yeah, this is a U card.
I love this card. This is very reminiscent of Kuldotha Rebirth to me.
That's the exact card I thought of. I'm like, Eric played Kuldotha Rebirth in Standard.
Yeah, dude, that was such a fun deck. It's almost like they tried to do like a callback.
Some sort of homage.
So the thing with Kuldotha Rebirth, it was kind of like designed for a constructed environment as opposed to cube. Gleeful Demolition gets around that because you just destroy target artifact. If it's yours, you get 3 1/1s. But like if you just need to kill an artifact, job done, 1 red.
It's definitely cute enough to get there. I see what you're going for there.
And since it's an uncommon, I think there is the indestructible lands that like you could do something cute with that and try and make it like a, hey, let's make this a little combo.
Oh yeah, because it doesn't need to actually be destroyed. That's interesting.
Yeah, and this is probably not making it in most cubes, but I think it's good enough that it could work in general cubes. I think Gleeful Demolition is really cool.
Yeah, there's definitely some cool stuff you can do with it, If you're pushing the red-white artifacts deck, it's pretty easy to have an artifact on the field that you can upgrade into 3 1/1s. It's possible that in your red-black sacrificey aggro deck, one of your creatures just happens to be an artifact, and you're like, okay, well, in that case, this ain't getting through anymore anyway. Let's go ahead and get rid of that, get the triggers, 3 more 1/1s. Like, there's some cool stuff you can do with it for sure.
All right, Brad, what do you got?
A card with only 10 printings in this set. Yeah, so Elesh Mom, mother of too many printings, is 4 and a white for a 4/7 legendary creature, Phyrexian Praetor. She's got Vigilance. If a permanent entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that triggers an additional time. Permanents entering the battlefield don't cause abilities of permanents your opponents control to trigger. She's Panharmonicon, but good.
I mean, you've tried push Panharmonicon, so...
And to be honest, way back in the day, I even tried using Torpor Orb. So she does both halves of that, and on a 4/7 for 5.
With Vigilance. Honestly matters with 7 toughness.
I just think she's very good, and if you want a Panharmonicon effect, she is the one.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. It's just one of those that I don't think generally cubes are going to be that interested in that effect.
I strongly disagree with that. I think people love that effect, and they want the excuse to play it, and this is the good enough that if you like play it instead of Kenrith or something or whatever else in that slot, then you won't care about the difference in how good it is compared to how splashy and fun it is.
Okay, and I can accept that. That's fair.
I just hate that it dies to 3 lightning bolts.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ugh, gross. It doesn't even have ward.
All right, Christian, what's your number 5?
So I also have a white card for my number 5 here. It has affinity, and it has real affinity, so I think that's probably worth talking about. So this is an uncommon Plated Onslaught. 3 white for an instant with affinity for artifacts, and creatures you control get +2/+1 until end of turn. I think that it is going to be very easy to make this a 2-mana card.
Is it worth it at 2 mana if you're an artifact-centric deck?
So I think that the artifact-centric deck in my cube is probably a little bit different than in your cube.
I assume as much, but...
One's trying to use Tezzeret.
Yeah, well, it's true. A lot of the artifact support in my cube happens to just be token makers. It's certainly an aggro deck.
Okay.
So because this is instant speed as well, I really like that aspect of it. Also, a lot of the board wipes in my cube are toughness based, not just destroy all.
Fair.
So in a go wide deck, this could allow for things to survive depending on, what you're doing there. So there's that aspect of it as well. I think that if you're ever casting this for 3 or more, it's not going to feel as good. But if you get to the point where you can play something and then have this up, especially if what you're playing somehow has haste or whatever, or maybe you use the extra mana to equip, you know what I mean? Like, there's ways to use that mana in that deck. I think this could be a useful thing to be looking out for. So again, it's number 5. It's not the best card in the set, but I do think it's worth talking about.
Okay. Eric, number 4.
All right, my number 4 is Conduit of Worlds. 2 green for an artifact. You may play lands from your graveyard. You can tap to choose target non-land permanent card in your graveyard. If you haven't cast a spell this turn, you may cast that card. If you do, you can't cast additional spells this turn. Activate only as a sorcery. I am a huge sucker for the lands deck. I like Remnant Excavator. I like Wrenn 6. I like lands that do things from graveyard, that do things that go to the graveyard. Like, that whole play pattern is fun. I think Conduit of Worlds is tough because 4 mana is a bit in that deck. A lot of times you're looking at a lower curve because you're using like wastelands and stuff. So you're limiting yourself to limit the opponent as well. That said, 4 is not unreasonable in the deck. And there are times that you're basically going to be out of gas because you don't generally have as many slots in your deck to have card advantage. So having the ability to recast something from your graveyard,
Wrenn 6,
is definitely an interesting thing, especially when they answer one of your scary
Wrenn 6s.
Yeah. So, it is one of those that this is a card that I'm most interested in the set, honestly, I think.
I understand why it is.
It'll be fun. I do have some concerns of like recommending it generally because 4 could be just one too many. I'm not sure. I don't think it is, which is why it's on the list, but I'll accept that if people don't like it, it's probably just because 4 mana is a bit too much for this effect.
I wonder how many more of these effects they have to print from now before some of them start getting pretty cheap for budget lists.
Well, the problem
is what you want to abuse. And Strip Mine, Wasteland.
Lands are always expensive.
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, maybe at some point they'll be printing enough mediocre to good Wasteland type effects that you're okay with it. But yeah, it's not really a budget thing.
Yeah, that's fair.
All right, Eric, thanks for the transition. We'll start off with my number 4. Mercurial Spelldancer is 1 and a blue for a 2/1 creature Phyrexian Rogue. It has Mercurial Spelldancer can't be blocked. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put an oil counter on it, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may remove 2 oil counters from it. If you do, when you cast your next instant or sorcery spell this turn, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy.
Good card.
It almost fell to my honorable mentions, to be honest.
Wow.
I think just being an unblockable 2-power for 2 means it's still good enough to be worth talking about here. I actually think it's slightly too cute for the spells deck that it's calling to.
I actually agree on that, but I don't think it's bad in that deck.
I don't think it's bad in the deck. I just don't think it's going to be good enough to fight the 2-drop slot in blue. Like, look at blue 2-drops historically, and it's going to have trouble getting in there. You have to also want the fact that it's unblockable 2-power for 2.
I also wonder if in that deck you're looking to be doing this, or you're just looking to be casting Fairy Dragon onto.
Sprite?
A Sprite Dragon. Sorry. Sprite Dragon.
And I think that's what Brad was saying is, like, in that deck, 2-drops are they're solid, they need to do what they're doing kind of thing, and this one isn't really. But it works as a 2-drop can't be blocked 2-power. Means that it'll be really cool in the Tempo Ninja deck.
The bleed between those decks is what saves it for me.
Yeah, like if you're trying to do both of those in your cube, Mercurial Spelldancer works well enough in both of them that it'll be a nice glue card of pick it up and you're not committed, but you have a solid card for either deck.
All right, Christian, bring us back to the land of uncommons.
No, because I'm going to talk about a common. So next up, at number 4, I have Bladegraft Aspirant. This is 2 and a red for a common 2/3. It has Menace. It has equipment spells you cast cost 1 generic less to cast, and activated abilities of equipment you control that target Bladegraft Aspirant cost 1 less to activate.
So next set, they will introduce a new equipment ability that does not target to screw this card over like they did with the dwarf from D&D set.
Dude, don't even. Not like this, man.
So this card is quite interesting. The fact that it has Menace on its own is what saves it. You know, if this didn't have some ability that allows it to be interesting outside of its other lines of text, then I don't think it would make it. However, that's 2 cost reductions, and I looked through my equipment section, and that can be nasty. That makes, I mean, if you play this and you draw into a Bone Splitter...
Nice.
Bone Splitter is a bit extreme, but like you run like Flare Husk, Trusty Machete.
It makes Trusty Machete, like, really good. And yes, you have to be targeting it to get the second reduction, but even just a couple of reductions, and this thing has wildly paid for itself.
And it's not a bad thing to target.
Exactly, yeah. Because of the Menace. It's a common, and I would have to imagine that at common, if you're trying to do some kind of equipment theme, it's probably a lot harder because of, you know, the fact that even at peasant level, it's hard because of the equipment's being so bad. Getting many generic cost reductions as you can is probably key to making them actually playable.
Yeah, this card's good enough that it makes Loxodon Warhammer not total trash.
Loxodon Warhammer is very good in peasant. It makes it much better. It makes Skull Clamp good.
Oh, wow. We broke Skull Clamp?
It reduces the cost of Grafted Wargear's equip.
It gives you mana.
It gives you mana. But yeah, so...
No, it's shockingly good at common.
It is. Like, it's honestly interesting for...
Eric, don't say rare cubes. I'll hit you.
It's honestly interesting for the, like, more budget-oriented that don't really have access to a lot of things, because those equipments are generally more expensive.
Yeah, that's fair.
How many times have we looked at an equipment and went, this would be awesome if it just cost 1 less to equip?
Exactly.
My problem with that, though, is, like, you're not putting bad equipments in because you have 1 card in your cube that makes them less bad.
Right, but if it's close.
We also have Brunor, so that makes a difference there. And between the two of them, I mean, I already play middling equipment anyway just to get to a certain density. Because at my rarity, a middling equipment, it can be fine. But then this takes those from that, like, C tier up to B plus or higher, just because you're suddenly able to do 2 to 3 things in a turn now, where you would not have been able to before.
Yeah. And I mean, you're talking to a guy with, like, Rayev in my cube right now. Like, you don't have to sell me too hard on making equipment work.
There you go.
All right. Eric, get us up to number 1.
Whoa.
This way we hide it in the middle of the episode where no one's expecting, and people who are in a rush will move to the end of the episode and get screwed. I'm just kidding, do number 3, because that's confusing me.
Whoa, now I'm confused.
Okay, next up I've got Vraan, Executioner Thane. Is 1 and a black for a legendary Phyrexian Vampire 2/2. Whenever one or more other creatures you control die, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. This ability triggers only once each turn.
Yeah, that last thing kind of turns me off a little, but it's still pretty good.
Still a 4-point life swing, though.
It's a 2/2 for 2, so it's not like we're on this, like, oh...
It's not Blood Artist 0/1. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an enchantment with a creature subtype.
Yeah, so until that last line, I was like, oh my god, we've done it. But realistically, I do think that Vraan is going to be good in those decks that are trying to do it, because 2 life points that you're taking away and gaining is a massive swing.
Did you say life points? Are you secretly playing Yu-Gi-Oh on the side?
What do you say, H-Pizzle?
H-Pizzle. Hang on, guys, I gotta go take an H-Pizzle.
Oh, he's playing a life gain deck.
Yeah, Vraan just seems fine. A lot of the Aristocrats cards don't actually go off all in one turn. You are incrementally doing it. And even if, like, you get some waste because you're sacrificing 2 creatures this turn instead of 1, it's still the equivalent of Blood Artisting. Like,
exactly. Yeah, the second one doesn't do it. You're still the same as what you would expect. And honestly, it's not that often that you sacrifice, like, 3 or more.
It's true. It's why I think this is honestly one of the better Blood Artists. But, like, man, is it hard to get over that last line.
It really is. But I think it's good enough, and people should be testing it and trying it for that effect. So, what nonsense do you want to bring up next?
So I'm just going to talk about the 6-drop elephant in the room of Eternal Wanderer.
Ah, okay.
She is 4 white for a 5 loyalty legendary planeswalker with a static ability of no more than 1 creature can attack the Eternal Wanderer each combat. She's got +1, exile up to 1 target creature, return that creature to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of that player's next end step. She's got a 0 of create a 2/2 white samurai creature token with double strike, and she's got a -4 of for each player, choose a creature that player controls. Each player sacrifices all creatures they control not chosen this way.
This has got to be the closest thing to Sun's Champion they've printed since Sun's Champion, right?
That's the comparison, yes.
And that is exactly why she's here. Elspeth Sun Champion is probably my favorite White Walker long term that's just always been glued to my cube.
It does exactly what you want, and the top end white planeswalker spot, it does it all.
And this is the first thing to actually make me doubt that I want her over this.
I just now realized the token has double strike. What the hell?
No. The token has double strike. Yeah.
I didn't even know that.
You were pre-episode talking about, oh man, that static ability is strong with the +1. I'm like, fuck that. It makes a double strike token.
Yeah.
You gotta beat a 2/2 double strike.
With one creature.
So, like, yeah, Eternal Wanderer is a strong control walker. She does compete with Sun's Champion, though, and Sun's Champion is already very good. So the question is, are you going to run both? Are you going to replace Sun's Champion? How do you feel about it? When we get to that level of detail for hot takes, I don't want to spend 30 minutes going through my different lines of play for them. But she is at least in argument with Sun's Champion. So there you go. We finally have competition in a slot that's never felt competition before. And the answer may be just remove a random white creature that's used in control decks and have both.
It is interesting that they work on like slightly different angles. Like Sun's Champion has token stuff, whereas Eternal Wanderer's got this like blink kind of thing going on.
You haven't mentioned too much about the -4 as well. Like that's a very important ability on this, is it not?
Yeah, the Cataclysm effect is weird.
But it's better on it because of her passive. So you just choose their weakest thing.
And then next turn, she's still alive most likely, and she just starts pumping out 2/2s.
The play pattern, again, is just like Sun's Champion. It does exactly what you want in the high end on white planeswalkers.
And as another note, like, just as something to remember, her +1, if you target your opponent's creature, it doesn't come back until their end step. So it's also fogging a creature if you want to use her +1 that way.
Oh my god, what the hell?
She is incredibly defensive.
If they have one scary creature and like some whatever trash, that +1 can just be like, yeah, your scary thing's gone.
She's probably better than like what I've got in my number 2, but It's my number 2, so screw you.
I really like your number 2 a lot.
I know. So, yeah, Eternal Wander is bananas. Very good card. Hopefully she's cheap because she's rare, not mythic.
Oh my god, I didn't even realize that.
Don't know how she got away with it because, man, the Phyrexian walkers all suck. Anti-honorable mention to all of them. Yeah, no, she's rare like Koth. That other great card in this set.
Fuck you.
You love Koth.
Yeah, I did. And then they fucking made him trash and killed him. Never forgive Watsy for this.
Didn't even have Linkin Park playing in the background.
Oh my god, we didn't even get cringe Linkin Park. Instead, we got cringe Avengers credits copy-paste job.
Christian, go on to your next one so I stop thinking about Koth.
For number 3, I have Experimental Augury. This is another common. This is 1 and a blue for an instant. Look at the top 3 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. Proliferate. So, lots of cards that are cantrips in Cube at lower rarities and higher rarities. Lots of cards that are 1 mana, so being 2 mana makes it much harder to get into the Cube, as I relearned for myself when I looked through my Cube and realized I don't really play any anymore at the 2 mana, which might be indicative of whether or not this card should be played, I think. If you are pushing counters in a blue deck, I'm pushing them in green-white. Obviously, you're never going to splash for this effect. So you have to be playing some kind of counter focus in blue. I do think that can leak into simply having planeswalkers. It's worth noting that the planeswalkers at my power level, they don't have plus abilities, so proliferating actually heals them to an extent where you wouldn't be able to otherwise. Getting that on top of this being good in control, I think is what gets it there.
Yeah, and I think it's arguable even if you're a lower power unrestricted cube, just because it gains so much from being in the best walker color.
Yeah, and the actual effect without the proliferate is solid. It's going to be helping do what you need to do.
Right, everyone's going to say, well, it's just worse impulse unless you're proliferating. That's true, but, I mean, most of the time that you're casting it, it's going to be fine. You're going to be oh, I need a land. Okay, there's a land in the top 3, I'm good. Or, I need something that's not a land. Okay, there's not a land in the top 3, I'm gonna take it. It's...
Basically, it's going to do enough that you're not going to be oh, this is a shitty card that, I'm only playing because of proliferate. With the proliferate, if you're going to be able to take advantage of that, it's neat. I actually really like this card as well.
And of course, there's always those corner cases where you have people... you build a cube a certain way, and you're this is for the X deck, this is for this other deck. But then you see what people build, and you're you're playing Experimental Augury in your blue-white counters deck that you built that I didn't intend to be a thing. All right.
Yeah.
And that's an important part of cube design, is you put things there with intent, but you realize that everything ends up splashing around and ending up in things you didn't originally consider, that then you may end up doing more mutations to your cube just so that those become more to the front.
That's honestly some of the most fun that can happen during drafting, and looking at what other people have drafted is you did what?
Sultai win conditions. I'm telling you.
All right, Eric, take us up to number 2.
I've got MacLeod's Maze Crusher for 1 red-green for a 4/4 legendary Phyrexian beast. MacLeod's Maze Crusher enters the battlefield with 5 oil counters on it. You can pay 1, remove an oil counter from MacLeod's. It gains Vigilance and Menace until end of turn. 2, remove 2 oil counters from MacLeod's. It gains +2/+2 until end of turn. And 3, remove 3 oil counters from MacLeod's. Destroy target artifact or enchantment.
Eric, defend this mediocre fucking green-red card, go.
It's tough because there are so many other options in red and green that probably are better generically. I just think in my red and green, I like the smash 'em good kind of decks, and Maze Crusher smashes them good.
I feel like the amount of mana is not worth it on this, though. You end up pissing away mana trying to keep this thing going.
It's only really going once or twice, right? You're not long-term trying to keep this thing going because you're not getting more oil counters. And that's not how the red-green smashy deck works. If you made it to turn 5 and they're not basically dead, you fucked up. So I just think it's kind of neat on the options that you have for this in the deck, that if you've got a bit of ramp going on because you've got elves, you can pump this up pretty high for the next turn that it swings and force them to answer this while you're doing other stuff. It just feels like it's doing the, I'm going to hit you with a club, answer the club, and we'll see what happens kind of thing.
I think there is some relevance to the play pattern of, okay, you play this out. On the following turn, you pay the 1, that way it has specifically Menace, right? And then you swing with it. And now, assuming you have mana up, they're wrestling with the fact that it's like, okay, I have to double block this if I block it at all. And then now it gives you the option to effectively pay mana for a removal spell, because this would likely stick around. And odds are that will either threaten to kill them on that point, or you're taking out 2 creatures for 0 cards.
You're taking out 2 creatures for the cost of making this card way worse magic card.
Yeah, but at that point, it's all a tempo-based thing, though, right? Because at that point, now they're down a bunch. You still have a 4/4. You didn't even have to cast anything in your hand, so you probably have, a fucking hasty dragon still lying around. There's different play patterns to it that I think are interesting.
The main play pattern that I'm looking at is the next turn, I pay 1, give it Vigilance and Menace, and I threaten to pay 2 to make it a 6/6 Menace.
I declare no blocks, take 6. Your creature now has 2 oil counters left.
Then I don't have to use it, and I can play another thing from my hand because I'm just down 1 mana. It's the threat.
I guess, but what 2-drop are you bringing out that I'm afraid of more than just taking the extra 2 damage then from paying the extra 2 mana? I have trouble seeing this, guys.
No, and that's fair. It's just, to me, a fun, smashy card. And a lot of times we've been moving our Gruul section more and more away from hit them with a big club. Like we're moving towards the Renin 6s.
I just re-added Mawloc, so we have hit him with a big club again.
I guess I forgot about Mawloc because that's in the not actual set.
The second best set of the year for 2022, right behind Neo.
Yeah, maybe it is one of those that Mawloc is what I was trying to get out of MacLeod and I just forgot about it. But I don't know, man. I just think it's a cool option to have to kind of go back to form for what I want Gruul to be, other than Renin 6.
All right, so let's move to my number 2, a much better green card.
Oh yeah?
Oh my god, I love this card. Sometimes I'm usually I'm not really a Timmy, but then I just see cards like this, I'm well, maybe a little bit.
I am always a Timmy. Dinosaur was the greatest thing to add to Magic. Tyrannosaurus Rex is 4 green for an 8/8 creature Phyrexian dinosaur. It's got this spell can't be countered. It's got trample, ward 4, haste, and toxic 4. The toxic actually sort of matters on this in a weird way. It makes this essentially just they're never going to try to block to lessen the damage because they're just going to get toxiced out anyway.
Okay, I see what you're saying. They can't just I'm going to throw my 4 toughness thing in front of it and stay alive.
Yeah, because you're just going to get ticked up in the toxic count in 3 turns anyway.
I think that's a minimal interaction, but I agreed.
It is, but that's why toxic's doing something on this card. Ward 4 just means it's essentially hexproof. That's a high enough number that Ward's stupidity doesn't bother me as much. And just being a trample haste 8/8.
That can't be countered, so it's Carnage Tyrant.
Yeah, Carney T is one of my favorite cards. So having him get an extra power, 2 extra toughness, and some flavor text, I'm fine with that for a mana. I'm not saying it's the best card in the set, but I'm also saying it's got the creature type dinosaur. And more cards like this, less cards that have 500,000 words on them, please.
Though it is one of those that, at 7, you got to start actually thinking about what's healthy for the rest of the cube.
7 is a lot worse than 6.
You can only have so many, and, are you just going to have Carnage Tyrant number 2 at 7, or,
I think that's fair. It's tangoing with Hornet Queen.
I think that's what drafters would want.
You could even, go down a Terastodon or whatever else you've got over 7, and just use this as the beat them to death card. I know T-Don is special to us, but you get what I mean,
Yeah, it's just one of those that, to me, a lot of those higher ones, I like them being more unique and doing something other than just
I also want the green deck to eventually win the game.
True.
And it has 2 horrendous matchups against 2 of the easiest decks in the world to pilot.
Fair enough.
Speaking of, back to Christian.
So my number 2 here, probably one of the other best cards in this set. This is Cankerbloom. So this is 1 and a green for a 3/2 uncommon Phyrexian fungus. Sus. A single generic mana and sacrifice this to choose one. Destroy target artifact, destroy target enchantment, or proliferate.
Green is sus.
Green is sus.
Green is... All right, anyway. At first, when I saw this card, I was like, oh my god, this is, okay, easy top 5 potential, third in the list. Then as I was making cuts, I actually cut it because I was like, well, yes, you've got an above rate body, but at 2 mana and green, that's not really been important before. And I've cut cards that were above rate just because it's like, well, very few green decks want to cast anything at 2 anyway, it seems like. So I removed it and I was like, yeah, we have other effects like that. We got free ones, blah, blah, blah. But then I added it back in because I thought about it again. And I'm like, okay, well, it's above rate and has a really good ability. So I'm a little torn. I think this card might be being a little bit overhyped.
I think the card's good.
Is the card hyped? It's just a generic, decent removal card.
I thought Thrashing Brontodon was insane. And it has all the same basic lines of text. It's 3 mana, but you get an above rate body, and you pay the 1 to get, a naturalize. Yes, I understand Proliferate exists on this.
I think that's a big part of it because it's green. Once you're in green, that +1/+1 counter thing matters. And if you're able to pay 1, sacrifice this, and you've got 3 other things that get bigger.
And because it's a Quasali Pride Mage, it's got that you're slowing your opponent's roll just by having it sit there and play. You can blow this for Proliferate whenever you want for value, but just while it's in play, your opponent is not casting that sword or whatever you're doing in Peasant, but they're not going to put down their enchantment or artifact of value for you to just detonate this and get a ton of value on them.
And that is the huge difference between 2-drop and 3-drop Thrashing Brontodon. The threat at 2 is like the rest of the game. The threat at 3 is, I already played the thing, so it's not a threat anymore. You're just paying 4 mana to remove it.
Yeah. And ultimately, I did bring it back and have it as my number 2. I think that this is one of the best generic cards that, what really sold me on it was I looked at the rest of the cards and I looked at this and I said, in 5 years, which out of any of these do I think will still be in my cube potentially?
None of them. They won't be here in 2 years. Have you looked at Magic the Gathering?
But you know what I'm saying. I was like, you know what, this is the only one on my list that's a cube card. All the rest are just thematic, they fit with my things and, maybe I'll try it out. But this is you could see this card existing for years to come.
All right, speaking of cards that'll exist for years to come, I'll move into my top one.
Oh, I thought you were going to say cards that make you come.
This also. Dude, this is such a good Boros card, though. Athari, Sun's Glory, 3 red-white for a 3/3 legendary phoenix with flying, lifelink, and haste. Whenever Athari Sun's Glory attacks, you get an experience counter. Then create a 2/2 red rebel creature token that's tapped and attacking for each experience counter you have. You can pay 2 red-white, tap an untapped rebel you control to return Athari from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. This is just dumb good.
Yep.
It's just tough to talk about cards that are just so obviously good. Did you read the card? Do you understand that it's bonkers good?
Is this the best Boros card?
I think so.
Wow.
This is better than the Walkers.
Not even close.
To remind everyone, this is 5 power, 3 of it is lifelink, haste for 5, and 3 of it is also flying.
Yeah.
And that's turn 1. It grows.
It also grows Rabblemaster style.
Yeah.
We're going out of control. And the fact that on top of all of that...
It just comes back to the battlefield.
The coming back is a little iffy on this one because the rebels are basically only going to be from it. So if it dies to a board wipe, it is gone. But still, just having partial chance of coming back is frightening on something that does Thundermaw levels of damage on turn 1.
Exactly. And it's also lifelink. So it's not even just one of those oh, I'm just killing them. I'm also making sure that if they're trying to race me, they're fucked.
It's interesting that you mentioned the board wipe because they board wipe and then you play this and their immediate thought is, fuck, I need a board wipe.
It's true. It's true. This comes down usually the turn after the board wipe.
Exactly.
So you just hold on to it till they wipe and you're like, all right, you better have a second one.
Yeah, I love this card. It's basically the only card I give a crap about from the Commander set.
Christian, you were talking about what do you expect to have in the cube 2 years from now or 5 years or whatever. Othari, I think, will exist in cubes for a while. Partially because Boros generally sucks, but also because it's just very good.
Yeah.
All right, Brad.
My number 1 won't be in cubes 5 years from now, but I don't care.
Will it be in cubes this year?
Fuck you, Eric. So, Atraxa Grand Unifier is 3 green, white, blue, black for a 7/7 legendary creature Phyrexian Angel.
God, you are a Timmy.
With flying, vigilance, death touch, lifelink, and when Atraxa Grand Unifier enters the battlefield, reveal the top 10 cards of your library. For each card type, you may put a card of that type of the revealed cards into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Atraxa is just in all the right colors to be a great cheat into play card, either in Reanimator or Show and Tell decks. Honestly, you could even do it in a sneak attack deck because it doesn't matter. The ETB value is so strong, and just one swing of this just moves the life total so much.
Just natural order it.
It's every cheat into playable on the planet and gets full value.
Honestly, the fact that you don't have to cast it, like it's just enters the battlefield, do the thing.
And it's been so long since we've had that.
Yeah.
So I am just happy for a return to form of having a big fuck off cheat into play creature.
Yeah, that's fair. But that's all it is.
Yeah. It's a 7-drop in 4 colors. If you cast it, you deserve the win, no matter what the board state was when you cast it. Your opponent just has to concede out of respect.
I feel like it's just bad manners. Because, like, you're clearly winning if you've been able to build up to this.
Or you're doing absolutely horrible in a ramp deck that's just trash. Like, you're at, like, 2 life, and they're like, sure, bud. You can draw all the cards you want. It doesn't even have haste.
You've lost every game you've played, and, like, this is the last game, and you're like, do your thing, man. Have fun. All right, Christian. You've been teasing this one.
You didn't even put it on the list, so it's got to be terrible.
What do you got?
Is it a 2/4?
It's not a 2/4.
Does it have lifelink or care about life gain?
No lifelink related. Okay, question for you guys. YouTube circa fucking 20 aughts. Do you remember Power Thirst?
No, I've not had a Power Thirst in many years.
Okay, it's hardly relevant, except this thing reminds me of it. It's like a dumb comedy, way over the top extreme, fuck you.
Oh, was that the parody on Volt or whatever it was called?
Probably. Yeah, it was like, Power Thirst, drink it, blah, 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 like, blah, 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 right? So, in one of their, like, secondary videos, it starts off by saying,
what if everything you ever wanted came in a rocket can? Power Thirst!
And that is what I think of every time I see this card. What if everything you loved came in a rocking chair? Because I want to talk about Sylvok Battle Chair.
God damn it.
This is a 6-mana 6/6 trample. That's a Dreadmaw. 4 green for an equipment. It has Formiraiden. So when it enters, you create a 2/2 red rebel creature token and attach this to it. It gives the equipped creature +4/+4 and trample, which is what, quote, makes this a 6/6 trample. And then it can be re-equipped to anything for a simple cost of 5 green.
I forgot this was in the set, and it's actually in Peasant, knowing how bad your high drops are.
Kind of neat.
It's legitimate.
I know, right? So, you get the 6/6 trample. That's a colossal Dreadmaw, except it's also a chair, Brad.
Calm down, Parnell.
And yes, after they kill your chair, anybody else can sit in the chair.
Yeah, I was like, if you kill the chair is gone. If they kill the rebel.
Okay, it's fair. Okay, if they kill, like, the dude. But if the chair sticks around...
Palaka Worm can sit in the chair.
Palaka Worm! If you're casting Palaka Worm, you know what you have? 7 mana.
You can equip it.
Scaled Behemoth can sit in the chair.
Scaled Behemoth can sit... Anyone you love or hate can sit in the chair. It's the great equalizer.
I love this. I'm fine with this.
Blossom Prancer can sit in the chair.
Blossom Prancer can sit in the chair. All right. So I thought to myself, what card do I care about most in this set?
That's fair.
And god damn it, I want this chair.
I like it.
So is Formiraiden like the worst name for a keyword?
Yeah, this is... I do kind of hate it.
It's got the exclamation point. Is it Megamorph bad?
It's not that bad.
I like this worse than Megamorph.
I think I like Megamorph more because Megamorph just is such a Power Rangers level stupid ability.
That's fair. Yeah. It's like so memed that it's fine.
And this doesn't have that potential. It's just awkward.
It's fine, I guess.
And it's such a specific name for an ability.
I don't think that's a problem. Like, it's a 2/2 red rebel token.
You'll remember it as like, oh, that's from the Phyrexia event.
Yeah.
I
mean, it's still, the exclamation point is the big, like, really? We're doing this?
I think it would look dumb if it didn't have the exclamation point as well, though. It'd be like, for Mirrodin. Like, I don't know. It also loses its meaning at that point as well, so.
The ability would be called, like, something like Uprising or something, if you were trying to make it more generic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or like Living Weapon, which is cool.
Living Weapon is cool.
It's a chair!
All right. On that note, goodbye.
Sounds good.